Imagine stepping into an old house, expecting a fresh start, only to find a haunting secret waiting for you. That's exactly what happens to Jake when he uncovers a mysterious mirror in his grandmother's attic, a mirror that seems to have a life of its own. From the very first moment he wipes away the dust, Jake feels a strange presence watching him. As he dives deeper, he realizes the reflection isn't just showing him his own image, but something much darker, something connected to a past he's tried to forget. Will he be able to face the truth hidden in that glass, or will the mirror's secret consume him? Keep watching to find out.
Behind the doors.
Jake took a deep breath as he crossed the threshold of his grandmother's old house. The smell of aged wood and dust hung in the air, wrapped in an almost palpable silence. The house, with its worn walls and foggy windows, seemed to hold stories in every corner, stories he was eager to uncover. For him, this was the perfect place for an artistic restart, away from the hustle and bustle of the big city, a refuge where he could let his creativity flow. If you can survive this haunted place, maybe you'll find the inspiration you're looking for, Jake murmured to himself, trying to push away the nervousness that accompanied him. He climbed the creaky stairs, with sunlight filtering through the cracks in the windows, lighting the way to the attic. With each step, his heart raced, a mix of excitement and apprehension. The attic had always been shrouded in mystery, and he didn't know what to expect. Opening the attic door, Jake was met with a disordered space filled with dusty boxes and furniture covered in white sheets. The room was submerged in shadows, and he had the feeling that something was watching him. He began to explore, moving some boxes and unearthing forgotten objects. An old typewriter, yellowed cookbooks, and even a broken guitar brought back memories of his childhood. Then, in a dark corner, Jake saw something that immediately captured his attention. A large mirror framed with intricately carved wood that spoke of a bygone era. The glass was dusty, and he hesitated for a moment, but curiosity drove him closer. As he wiped the glass with the sleeve of his shirt, a chill ran down his spine. The reflection he saw was not just his own. "Wow, you're a relic, aren't you?" Jake whispered, trying to break the tension. He looked closer, examining every detail of his reflection. But as he scrutinized it, a strange feeling began to take over him. The reflection seemed to look back with an intensity that left him uneasy. It was not just an image. There was something almost alive in those depths. "You're watching me, aren't you?" Jake spoke, a nervous smile forming on his lips. "What do you think about some art? I'm in need of inspiration." He laughed, but the echo of his laughter was lost in the vast silence of the attic. To his surprise, the reflection did not smile back. Instead, it seemed to intensify the expression of curiosity, as if it were assessing every nuance of his soul. "Maybe you have something to say to me," Jake teased, feeling a bit foolish for talking to his own image. But there was something there, a strange connection. He took a step forward, and the image followed him, but at the same time seemed to hesitate. It was as if the mirror contained an energy that attracted him, but also repelled him. Jake backed away, trying to shake off the feeling of discomfort. "I think I need a coffee," he said to the emptiness, seeking some sort of normality. However, when he looked again at the mirror, he noticed that the expression of his reflection had changed. There was a shadow of something deeper in his eyes, something he couldn't understand. Feeling increasingly uneasy, Jake decided it was time to leave the attic and explore the rest of the house. But as he walked away, he couldn't shake the feeling that the mirror was still watching him, as if it were waiting for something he wasn't ready to face yet. The house, with its stories and mysteries, was beginning to reveal itself as a labyrinth of emotions he couldn't fully comprehend. And in his heart, Jake knew that the mirror held secrets that would change his life forever. Jake was sitting in his small studio, which had once been the guest room of his grandmother's old house. The walls were adorned with blank canvases, waiting for the explosion of creativity he hoped to find in his new life. However, inspiration seemed as distant as the gray clouds covering the sky that day. He couldn't get the image of the old mirror he had found in the attic out of his mind, with its foggy glow and the mysterious aura surrounding it. In the days that followed, Jake began to notice something strange about his reflection. When he looked in the mirror, he didn't just see his image. He noticed that the reflection seemed to have a life of its own. When he smiled, the reflection maintained a neutral expression, but in moments of sadness, Jake could see a shadow of a wicked smile forming on his image's lips. Each day that passed, the feeling of discomfort grew, as if the mirror was becoming a portal to a world he couldn't understand. One night, while trying to concentrate on a sketch that seemed to be going nowhere, Jake got distracted by his reflection. He was so immersed in his thoughts that he didn't realize the expression of his reflection had changed. The image in the mirror was smiling, but it wasn't a friendly smile. It was a sinister smile, one that seemed to mock him. Jake felt a chill run down his spine, and his hand trembled, almost dropping the pencil he was holding. "You're scared, aren't you, Jake?" A soft but cold voice echoed in the room. He turned quickly, but there was no one there, just him and the mirror. "This can't be happening," Jake murmured, shaking his head. "It's just a reflection, just a reflection." He tried to convince himself, but the panic began to take hold of him. He stood up abruptly and left the studio, deciding he needed some fresh air. However, the night was long, and Jake found it difficult to escape his own fear. Nightmares began to haunt him in his bed. He dreamt of shadows dancing around him, whispering dark secrets, revealing truths he struggled to forget. Every time he closed his eyes, the image of the smiling reflection pursued him, like a specter of his own guilt. The next morning, Jake decided to ignore the mirror, hoping that by not looking, the problem would disappear. He tried to focus on his art, but the malignant figure in his mind wouldn't leave him alone. He sat at a coffee shop table trying to sketch something inspiring, but instead, he found himself just watching the people around him, distracted, as they passed by without a care. What he wouldn't give to live in their innocence, without the weight of a secret crushing him. "Hey, Jake!" A familiar voice interrupted his reverie. It was Clara, a childhood friend who had recently moved to the city. She approached with a welcoming smile. "You look distant. What's going on?" Just thinking about things," Jake replied, trying to hide the whirlwind of emotions consuming him. "Nothing I can't handle." "If you need someone to talk to," Clara said, leaning in closer, "I'm here. Sometimes talking helps." "Thanks, Clara," he forced a smile. "I just need some time to adjust to all this." But even as he spoke, Jake knew it wasn't just the change affecting him. Something deeper was tormenting him, and he felt increasingly surrounded by shadows, as if the mirror in his house was sucking his essence, revealing parts of himself he preferred to keep buried. When he returned home, the feeling that the mirror was waiting for him intensified. He hesitated at the studio door, the faint light illuminating the polished surface. "I won't look," he told himself, but the words sounded hollow. Curiosity and fear intertwined, forming a dense web in his mind. Jake took a deep breath, but the voice of the reflection seemed to echo inside him. "You can't escape me, Jake. I am you." The truth in those words hit him like a punch in the stomach. The battle was just beginning, and he knew that to emerge victorious, he would need to face what was hidden behind that enigmatic glass. Jake sat at the kitchen table, his restless hands playing with the worn wooden surface. The silence of the old house enveloped him like a heavy blanket, and even the daylight filtering through the windows seemed timid, hesitant. He couldn't stop thinking about the mirror he had found in the attic. The image of his reflection smiling sinisterly still haunted him, and the sense that something was very wrong kept him on edge. Determined to find out more about that unsettling object, Jake decided it was time to visit the local library, hoping to find information about the mirror's history. He took a deep breath, got up, put on a jacket and left, the door creaking as it closed. The fresh morning air contrasted with the heavy atmosphere he left behind. Upon arriving at the library, Jake was greeted by a familiar smell of old books and aged paper. The librarian, an elderly woman with white hair and thick-framed glasses, welcomed him with a warm smile. "Are you here to research something in particular, young man?" she asked, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Yes, I'm looking for information about an old mirror. It belonged to a woman who disappeared decades ago," Do you know anything about it? Jake replied, feeling the anxiety grow in his chest. The librarian frowned, thoughtful. Ah, you must be talking about Elizabeth's mirror. They say she was a talented artist, but her disappearance left the town in shock. The mirror. Well, there are rumors that it can capture the soul of those who look into it. Jake felt a chill down his spine. Capture the soul? What do you mean by that? He asked, curiosity and fear mixing in his mind. Some people believe the mirror is a portal, a link between this world and something beyond. Elizabeth was deeply involved in her works, and many think she tried to use the mirror to connect with other realities. But somehow it went wrong, the librarian explained, her eyes shining with a mix of fascination and fear. Do you have more information about her disappearance? Jake asked, eager to understand what had happened. She moved away to fetch a box of files and began to leaf through documents. Here it is. Elizabeth was last seen in her home, and the mirror was found in the attic, exactly where you found it. Since then, the house has been considered cursed, and many avoid going near it. Jake felt a knot form in his stomach. The stories he had heard about the house and the mirror now seemed more than just urban legends. They were warnings. Do you think the mirror could be connected to her disappearance? He asked, his voice almost a whisper. The librarian looked at him seriously. Some believe the mirror reflects not only the image, but also the fears and traumas accumulated over a lifetime. If Elizabeth was dealing with something deep and painful, maybe she got lost trying to confront it. Jake thanked the librarian and left the library, his mind full of thoughts. He needed to return home. He needed to face the mirror again. What more could he discover? What more could he see? When he entered his house, the atmosphere seemed even heavier. The mirror awaited him in the attic, like a patient predator. Jake climbed the stairs, each step echoing in his heart. The attic light was dim, and the mirror seemed to glow faintly, as if it were alive. He stood before the mirror, his breath quick and uneven. "What do you want from me?" he asked aloud, feeling the adrenaline rush through his body. But the reflection didn't respond. Instead, it began to show blurry images, as if it were searching for something within him. Jake felt a chill down his spine as visions of the past flashed before his eyes. He saw glimpses of moments he preferred to forget. The accident, the scream, the loss of his friend. The pain he thought he had buried began to resurface, and he found himself confronted with his own weaknesses. "You can't trap me here," he said, his voice trembling. "I've been through this." But the reflection seemed to laugh, a laugh that reverberated in his mind. "You still don't understand. You're still trapped." Jake felt the pressure increase, as if the very air was being sucked from his lungs. He found himself at the mercy of a game he didn't fully understand, and the only way out seemed to be to confront the truth he had avoided for so long. Jake was sitting on the edge of the bed in his room, staring at the old mirror that now dominated one of the walls. The sunlight filtered through the window, casting shadows that danced around his reflection. But the true dance was happening on the other side of the glass. The reflection, which once seemed to be just a copy of Jake, now manifested its own presence, a consciousness that observed, analyzed, and somehow mocked him. "You can't ignore this forever, Jake," the reflection said, its voice an echo, almost a whisper, but laden with an intensity that made Jake's body shiver. He stood up, trying to move away, but his feet seemed glued to the floor. "I want you to listen to me. You know I'm the truth you've been avoiding." "I don't have time for this," Jake retorted, trying to stay calm, but his voice failed to convey the firmness he desired. "I have to paint. I need inspiration." With each word, the anxiety grew, forming a tight knot in his stomach. "Ah, painting," the reflection laughed, but it wasn't a laugh of joy. It was a bitter laugh, full of derision. "Do you really think you can escape from me with paint and brushes? Art won't save you, Jake. You can't escape from what you did." Jake felt a chill down his spine. The mention of the past hit him like a sharp blade. He remembered the accident, the fateful night that changed everything. "I don't want to talk about that," he murmured, almost to himself as his hands trembled slightly. "But you need to. Do you think forgetting will make it disappear?" The reflection advanced, its eyes now a dark abyss. You're trapped in your own cycle of guilt. I am your pain, and you can't ignore me forever. Jake felt hot tears rolling down his face. The weight of the guilt he had carried for years seemed to be materializing before him. I didn't want that to happen. I didn't want him to die. He sobbed, his voice breaking in despair. Then what are you going to do about it? Keep hiding behind a canvas? Colors won't erase your truth. The reflection gestured forcefully, almost as if it were trying to hit Jake with its words. Face me, Jake. Face yourself. Jake took a deep breath, trying to find his center amidst the emotional chaos. How can I face you? You're just a reflection. He was aware that those words sounded weak, a desperate attempt to maintain control. I'm much more than that. I am everything you try to hide. The reflection now seemed calmer, an unsettling calm that enveloped the atmosphere. You can't live like this, Jake. What happened wasn't your fault, but you need to forgive yourself. Touch the mirror and face the truth. The words reverberated in his mind. The idea of touching the mirror terrified him, but at the same time there was a spark of hope. And if I do that, what will happen? Jake asked, his voice now a whisper. You'll find that the truth is liberating, the reflection replied, its expression changing to a mix of empathy and intensity. Only then can you move on. Jake hesitated, but the urgency to free himself from that emotional prison propelled him. He approached the mirror, his heart pounding in his chest. It's okay. I can do this. He reached out, the surface of the mirror reflecting not only his image but also his insecurities, his hopes, and his pain. When his fingers touched the cold glass, an electric sensation ran through his body, as if he were about to cross an invisible barrier. He felt the weight of his past accumulating, a storm about to break. I'm ready, Jake said, in an act of courage that defied his own limitations. Jake hesitated for a moment, his hand outstretched towards the dusty mirror. The glass reflected not only his image, but the pain and despair he had tried to ignore for so long. With a deep sigh, he touched the cold surface, and in an instant, he felt himself pulled into the mirror. The sensation was like being sucked into a whirlwind of emotions and memories. When he finally opened his eyes, Jake found himself in a distorted world. The colors were more saturated, as if everything were in a surreal painting, where shadows danced and lights flickered in a hypnotic manner. He was in a space that seemed like a twisted version of his own studio, but what struck him the most was the presence of his reflection, which now manifested as a shadowy figure, with a sinister smile. Welcome back, Jake, said the reflection, its voice echoing in the air like a malevolent whisper. Have you finally decided to face the truth? Jake felt a chill down his spine. Truths? You're not the truth. You're the guilt, the pain. I am not you. His voice trembled with the intensity of the emotion. Oh, but I am more than that, replied the reflection, stepping towards Jake. I am the part of you that can't break free. I am the soul of your friend, trapped in this cycle because of you. The reflection's words hung heavy in the air, and Jake felt his heart race. No, this can't be true, Jake shouted, retreating. He didn't want to believe it. The image of the accident, the screams, the guilt, all came back to him like a fresh nightmare. You're not his soul. You're just my fear. Fear? The reflection laughed, a laugh that reverberated through the space. You don't understand, Jake. I am the personification of what you've hidden. I am the pain you haven't faced. And now you must choose. Stay here forever, or fight to free not just me, but yourself as well. Jake looked around, the walls of the twisted studio seeming to close in on him. He knew he needed to act. What do I need to do? He asked, his voice almost a whisper. Confront your demons. Face the truth about what happened that fateful night. Together, we can break the chains that bind us. The reflection extended its hand and Jake hesitated. It was a tempting offer, but also terrifying. You won't deceive me again, said Jake with more firmness. If you are my friend's soul, then tell me, what happened that night? The reflection hesitated, its expression shifting from a malicious smile to deep sadness. He was in the passenger seat, Jake. You were distracted. You didn't see the curve. And he didn't have a chance. The words hit Jake like a stab. He remembered the music playing on the radio, the carefree conversation they had moments before the accident. I can't change the past, he murmured, the pain overflowing in tears. It's not about changing the past, but about accepting and releasing it. You can't keep hiding from your own pain. The reflection seemed more human, closer to who Jake truly knew. Jake took a deep breath, the truth settling in his mind. He couldn't carry this weight any longer. The guilt that imprisoned him needed to be released. If this means I need to let you go, then I'll do it. Are you ready? The reflection paused, and for the first time, Jake saw a glimmer of hope in the somber expression. Then let's go together. Jake approached and, in an act of courage, touched the reflection's hand. A wave of light enveloped the two, and he felt the chains of guilt and pain dissolve around him. The light intensified, and in one last moment, he heard his friend's voice echo softly. "Thank you, Jake. Now I'm free." With a final flash, the reflection dissolved, and Jake emerged from the mirror, falling to his knees on the studio floor. He was free. The weight that oppressed him had vanished. Jake looked at the mirror, now just an ordinary piece of glass, and smiled. Finally, he was ready to move on, without the ghosts of the past holding him back.